So hello and welcome to our program. Today's guest will be from the United States, the politician of the United States, and then we're welcome to our show. David O is an American attorney and a politician who is a member of the Philadelphia City Council as well. So welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you. We will talk a lot about the activity of your community, of Philadelphia people who are helping Ukraine in any ways. But first, my question will be more about the global situation. And I want to ask you, what is the assessment of the situation in various aspects? At what stage, in your opinion, is the war in Ukraine right now? So how the situation, from your point of view, changed since the February 24th, and what are the positions of Ukraine and Russia in this war from this day on?
Okay, so I'm a local politician. I'm on the council of the city of Philadelphia. So my perspectives are really just from the city of Philadelphia and not from the federal government, not from Washington, D.C., or even the state of Pennsylvania. But from what I have seen, there has been a development of the American perspective on the war in the Ukraine. First, there was a lot of hesitation on the part of the U.S., particularly among the elected leaders, to get involved in dealing with the Russian buildup on the border. And I think many Americans were concerned about getting involved in the war in the Ukraine because they feared that it would escalate maybe a global war. After the Russian invasion crossing the border, and as more news came in about the damage, the brutality to innocent people, and also, quite frankly, the resistance by the Ukrainian people. Many people believe this would be a very short war, that Russia would overrun the Ukraine. But as Ukraine continued to defend their land and their freedom, it was very inspirational to the people here in the United States. Our history is one of revolution as well. And so as time went by, there was more support among the American people to give aid to the Ukraine. There was still resistance. We have people who very much do not want to be involved in global issues or global matters because of the pandemic, the economic downturn, struggling here in the United States itself. But I think overall, when in Washington, particularly with President Biden and congressional leaders, they began to send aid. I think that was a positive step, and I think many Americans supported it.
It's interesting about the people that are still doubting if you should spend money to help Ukraine. And I have several questions about this. I wanted to discuss it a little bit later, but as soon as you open this question, so let's continue in this way. So we understand that lobbyists, let's talk about politicians first. So we understand that lobbyists were and is and will be always in our social life. But there is common sense of understanding the situation. If it's not scary for them, what makes them skeptical, except for corruption matter that you just told about? So what make people still be skeptical? It's less of information from what's going on really in Ukraine, or it's just simple material interests of them.
So I think many Americans, and I think that the majority of Americans are very supportive of the Ukraine, the people in the Ukraine. However, their support varies. Those who are against supporting the Ukraine, I don't think that they have incorrect information. So I think it is that they feel disconnected. They don't feel that what happens in the Ukraine impacts them. And so you could say it is a lack of concern. You could say it is a selfishness. You could look at it many ways, but I think they are concerned about their own problems and they are not interested in the world's problems. And the world is everyone outside of the United States. There is a small group of people, I believe, that are susceptible to misinformation. Of course, there's a lot of misinformation being directed at certain people through social media and other things. I think they're susceptible to that. But I think the main issue is that because people have dealt with the COVID pandemic, they have lost their jobs. The economy has been difficult. They've been locked down. They're very upset at their government. And now when they see the government sending billions of dollars overseas, it makes them upset. So I think that is the main reason. I don't think it's a small group that oppose engagement with supporting the Ukraine.
But we're talking about $1 trillion that are every year for the economy of the United States from the government comes. And lots of political analysts that I talk to, mostly from Europe, and some of them from the United States, still continue to tell that it's not enough money. And the United States have the chance and has to give much more money to stop the war in Ukraine. If comparing to that amounts that were sent to Afghanistan and other hot points on the planet. So why these doubts between different analysts still exist about this sum of money that are supposed to be given by the government of the United States?
Well, different people have different opinions. I think it's a reflection of how they look at things. On my part, I think the U.S. should have been involved much sooner in a more forceful manner, but I'm not in Congress. I just felt very much that we should put a military presence in the Ukraine, and I did a resolution that we should have a humanitarian no-fly zone much earlier. But, you know, people oppose that because they're afraid it's going to start a war that will engage the U.S. My feeling is that we are already engaged and that it is better for us to get right to the point, and perhaps Russia would not have crossed the border. But whether it's the Ukraine or Afghanistan or many other countries around the world, the U.S. does send money and materials to other countries. So they're not opposed to the Ukraine in particular. They're just opposed to sending U.S. resources outside of the U.S. I think that is kind of like an isolationist point of view. And at least on my part, and I think many people like me, we believe that we cannot exist in a democracy alone. Every nation that is committed to freedom and democracy must support the other nations, or those nations will not be able to stand against the powers of tyranny. So in a way, the Ukraine is at the forefront of fighting for democracy and self-determination. It is a fight we are not physically engaged in. No American is being killed. No American is being bombed. And so what we should do is we should send material and resources to support the people of the Ukraine who are fighting this fight for all of us.
You know, it's very interesting from the entire political point of view of the United States, because you have two-party politics. And I remember before the beginning of war, maybe a month before, I had an interview with Kurt Walker, it's a special representative for Ukraine from the United States. And he assured me that even despite the disagreements within the country for the entire politics between Democrats and Republicans on external issues, they always have one single position, especially for Ukraine or about Ukraine. So has this status quo still exist between Democrats and Republicans towards the situation in Ukraine? Or it changed somehow? Because a lot of critical stuff we hear, especially from the representatives of Republican Party.
Well, I don't know if that was ever true to begin with. The United States is a country that has a lot of very different opinions, and mostly people are people. They are rarely identified by their political party, but they do elect people. For the most part in this country, over the last several years, we have people on either end of the party voting very vigorously. That means if they're more to the far left or more to the far right, they vote. But people in the middle, which is the majority of people, they have not been voting, and they usually don't vote. When things become very bad or there is some major issue that occurs in this country, the majority of people, who are mostly moderate in the middle, they may be Republican, they may be Democrat, they may be independent, they do go and vote. I think the characterization of the parties is somewhat incorrect. There are party leaders, and their opinion about the world situation varies from individual to individual. On my part, for example, I am a Republican. I believe that we best stop tyranny before it starts. So people like me, we will like to see a more clear, full-force engagement of the U.S. in protecting Ukraine. I believe that will save lives, save problems, and really save a lot of complications. And the reason why some of my resolutions to support the Ukraine have failed in a mostly democratic city is because those people are very afraid of war. I'm not supporting war, but war is coming one way or the other. So either you stand up against it or you allow it to occur. I think it is a mistake to allow horrible things to occur without standing against it. So some people could say that is a Republican perspective. I don't think so. I just think people have very different views, and people who think like I do. Some of them served in the military like me. Some of them did not. Some of them are Democrats. Some of them are Republicans. I think it just depends on how you look at the world.
I just want to use a chance while I'm speaking to the representative of political world of the United States and ask you a little bit more about the entire political situation, because for our audience it's very interesting too, not just the war, because these things affect the situation in the battlefield as well.
Yes.
More or less. But can you or may you right now already predict or make some forecasts for the future elections in the United States? What might the U.S. government look like? What will be the balance of power between Democrats and Republicans right now? Because we heard more and more about the next wave of Trump appear on the scene of political world in the United States. What's going on in entire policy?
Well, a lot of times people are elected because of the circumstance, not because of what they say or what they stand for. So when the environment changes, people want a solution and they elect someone. That is how Donald Trump became president. That is how Barack Obama became president. So they're both unexpected. They were both not very much expected to become the president, but they both did. But in that circumstance, there was more of a kind of a far left or far right. And I should clarify, I don't want to, people may misinterpret that. They're left, that means they're more liberal or socialist. They're right, they're more conservative. But I think people in the middle, which is a very large group of people, the largest group of voters, while they may be Democrat or Republican, they may be liberal or conservative, they're much more moderate and in the center. I think that they will come out to vote. I think things have shifted from more towards the far right, the far left, more towards the middle. Things like defunding the police or not arresting people for violent crimes, that was popular a few years ago. That is becoming very unpopular. Fiscal responsibility is becoming important. But with that, there is an understanding that we are not alone in the world. The idea of being isolationist is usually somewhat on the far ends of the political spectrum, further right, further left. But most people in the middle understand we live in a global environment. So I think what's going to happen is that the next president of the United States is more likely to be less, I don't want to say extreme, but less kind of to the further ends of the polar scale, less polarized, more willing to work together, more dealing with the kind of like everyday matters that people care about. And I think that presents like an interesting question about what will happen with the Ukraine, because I don't think it is a Democrat-Republican party matter. I think it is a matter of how to intelligently deal with the people of this country in showing them a strategy to get the best situation out of the Ukraine, which, in my opinion, is not to compromise the territory of the Ukraine. That would not be a good thing. That only encourages, dictators to cross borders and to continue to cross borders. I think the war seas should enforce the security of borders and self-determination and show that there will be no gain from invading other peoples. So I think that those are things that will come up. Whoever the president is, Democrat or Republican, whoever's controlling the House or the Senate, I think there will be much more kind of reasoned. They do want to end the war. The question is, how do you end? I think you cannot end in a way that encourages brutality, war, dictatorship, inhumane treatment. And that means that you have to secure all the territories of the Ukraine, have the Russian forces withdraw completely, and try to then engage in a productive relationship, the U.S. to Russia, the U.S. to the Ukraine. But that is a matter of national politics, and they are the ones who deal with international politics.
You know, that might be simple questions, but still they're difficult to understand for us. Announce these questions right now. So
Sure.
The position of the United States, is the United States really interested in the fast end of this war? And if so, how can you explain some delays in supply of hard weapons to Ukraine? Because time after time, the explanation changed completely. First, they're afraid of escalation. The next time, they're trying to count how much weapons they have in their country and if there's enough for themselves. And next time, another explanation. So it arouses the question that the reason is not that is shown on TV and spoken by politicians. It's a little bit more deeper. So is the United States interested in the fast ending of this war?
Well, I think political leaders and the American people are interested in ending the war quickly. How it ends quickly is the question. As we just discussed, some people will like to negotiate a ceasefire immediately, let the Russians keep the territories they're in, and have the U.S. exit this entire situation. But that's a quick end. Other persons would like a quick end. They would like the Russians to immediately withdraw from the Ukraine. That would be a quick end. Unlikely, but that would be a quick end. So while people would like a quick end, I do think that realistically, it's not a quick end, because a quick end cannot be an excuse to have a bad end. There's already been a lot of bloodshed. There's already been a lot of suffering. It should not be in vain. People should not have died and suffered to simply just submit and give up to tyranny. We should defend democracy. And if we don't fight here today, we shall fight somewhere tomorrow. That is just the kind of a reality that we must make our stands where we can, and the loss we suffer today will be less than the loss we suffer tomorrow. So there has already been a lot of loss in Ukraine. The U.S. has already put a lot of material in there, but we have we have not lost any lives in the Ukraine. We might lose lives someplace else. I think the withdrawal from Afghanistan is an example of a bad withdrawal. a bad decision, and a lot of people have suffered. There has been a lot of loss because of our presence. There has been a lot of gain because of our presence. So I think at the same time, we want to have a quick end, but we don't want to have a bad end. And therefore, I think this is what will be up for discussion as we enter the next year's presidential race.
One of the bad ends for the Russian Federation is the stop of existing of Russian Federation in geopolitical sense. I mean, the spread of this country to many different countries. And the possibility of civilian war as well is large spoken among the analysts here. But what scenarios the United States see for Russia for not having other wars on the planet? I mean, what will be the best for the United States? Maybe this explanation of why you choose not to make radical movements towards Russia with the hard weapon. Maybe. This is my subjective point of view.
Well, I'm not really qualified to answer the question. Again, I just want to let your audience remember that I'm a city council person from Philadelphia. I'm not in Washington, D.C. I'm not a U.S. senator or the president or anybody like that. But to answer your question, I know that the U.S. is committed to the NATO countries. The NATO countries are very concerned about the aggression Russia towards the Ukraine. It makes everybody nervous, makes them hesitate, makes them have to prepare. On the other side of the world, there's a lot of concern that Russia does not enter into their countries or influence their governments to take advantage of the natural resources and other things that they have as well. Once Russia becomes an aggressive country that invades other borders, it makes everybody very nervous. I think on the part of what the United States would do, I think right now, in case your listeners or viewers did not know, we are going through some internal turmoil as a society. The U.S. Right now is battling within our own society as to whether the U.S. is a good country or a bad country, right? The problem for the Ukraine is this. When people say the U.S. is a bad country, it is full of injustice, racism, and things like that, that is basically to say the U.S. should not be involved in the world at all. We have no ability, no right, no responsibility to defend other peoples, to be concerned if they are being invaded, because we are not a good country. When the U.S. believes it is a good country, then it has a responsibility to people who are being attacked, who are being invaded, because we have to stand as free nations. And the U.S. being blessed with peace and with prosperity must stand up for countries in their weakest moment.
Well, that's the interesting perspective. I mean, thank you for being honest, actually. Talking about the words and actions, there's one more thing that is not quite understandable for us here in Ukraine. And I'll ask you, your point of view. I understand that you are not in the big politics, yet. But yet, we'll talk about it later. Many words we hear about the isolation of Russia and about the creating the courts for the military criminals and about the future where Russia will no longer play such a huge role on the geopolitical scene. And we heard a lot about the Russian economy that is failing and destroying and so on. But so far, reality presents surprises for us from different news agencies. We hear that the information sometimes much the contrary to what we expect to see in the real life. Why is that? Why in the words we hear this, but in the reality it still stays strong, it still have business communications with some countries, it still have earned money to pour it into the weapons and continue war in Ukraine, and the economy is still normal from what we hear from the Russian Federation. What is this? How do you think?
Well, I think it's typical. I think it's usual. In other words, let's say that there's a country that condemns Russia, and then they want to create an embargo, or they want to block certain things of Russia as a protest for its bad actions. But having done that, in reality, there's a lot of trade and a lot of commerce. There's a lot of private people and public needs being fulfilled by natural resources, and natural gas and oil. And there are collaborations between wealthy corporations and wealthy people that continue to go on. However, we are generally talking about Putin and his government leaders. I have no desire, and I don't think people want to see Russian people suffer. The commerce that occurs and a lot of things, so people have electricity and heat, and then they can earn money and have a bright future, that continues to go on. If the governments are honest, and if they really want to do a very crippling blow to the Russian economy, then they should say so. If they want to have some symbolic, kind of action that has some effect, maybe minor effect, then they should say so. I think the reason why there's confusion is because there's a lack of honesty and a lack of clarity.
Mm-hmm. I see. So let's speak about the civic society. We see from the beginning of the war that the role of diaspora, Ukrainian diaspora, especially in the United States and Canada, it always was very strong. But in the United States, it spreads very fast and shows a lot of interest, a lot of activities in the United States. But what role does United States civil society play, influence in politicians regarding support of Ukraine, and what are the strong arguments for them maybe or might be to make it much more stronger?
What happens is the Ukrainian diaspora, I think, has played a very important role in informing the American public about what is happening in Ukraine. We, for example, here in Philadelphia, we have a very large Ukrainian community. They came here in the 1930s and 40s, where there was a lot of, as you know, starvation imposed upon the Ukrainian people by the Russians and the Soviet Union, those type of things. So they established themselves here, and they're watching what is happening in Ukraine. So they explain a lot of the history, the brutality to people such as myself here in our local, state, and federal government. And as they are connecting with other peoples, especially like Polish, Lithuanian, Belarusians, and Uzbekistanis, and Georgians, and others. They build a coalition of support for the shared values. Myself, my father was born in Korea. My father was born in China from Korea because of the Japanese occupation, and then World War II, and then the Korean War. So he came to Philadelphia in 1953. So from our perspective as Korean Americans, we're very familiar with invasion, brutality, and actually the fact that countries like the United States came to aid Koreans, and it was divided in half between South and North. And that therefore, if it was not for the intervention of other countries and their military and support, we would all be in a communist dictatorship facing starvation right now. So without a level of freedom, you cannot have self-determination, and you cannot have economic prosperity or other things which give people the ability to live a full life. But these things are not free. They are fought for. We could say that God gave us freedom, but man gives us tyranny. It is actually a short time in history that people have had democracy. Mostly the strong devour the weak. That is the way of nature. So we, as people, can join with the Ukrainian diaspora here in the United States.
On one hand, we have Ukrainian diaspora and community of other nations that support Ukraine. But on the other hand, we have people with pro-Russian moods. And what's the situation in Philadelphia, for example? And what are these people? Who are they? Where they get the information? If we know that a lot of channels from Russia propaganda is cut off the satellites. I'm sorry, I forgot the word. But anyways, are there lots of people with pro-Russian position in Philadelphia?
Not that I've seen. Philadelphia is, I think, to the extent that people are concerned, it's overwhelmingly pro-Ukrainian. There are people who are pro-Russian, and they may have that idea, from the beginning. We have a Russian-speaking population that consists of people from 15 different nations, many from Ukraine, some from Russia, but I've not seen a very significant presence of people who are speaking for Russia and against Ukraine.
So I would like to know more about the activity of the Society of Philadelphia. And I know that you take part, or you even the initiator of all these activities in supporting Ukraine. So tell us, please, about your activity. And you just explained why you stand so close to Ukraine. From perspective of the history of your family and understanding in this historical processes. So what do you do with your Society of the Philadelphia?
So I'm a citywide representative. I'm elected to represent everyone in my city. We have 1.6 million people in Philadelphia. And I'm one of 17 council members. We are the legislature, and then we have a mayor, who is the boss of our city workers. And altogether, we provide the core services from public safety to taking care of the roads and making sure that we have money to provide the services. That means we tax people. And then, of course, when people get taxed, they want to see a good service. And so I am someone who challenges our city government because I don't think we do a good job in many ways, and I think we overtax people. So, I'm in a situation where politically I am in the minority of this city, but I champion different causes, mostly for people who don't have representation. But I also am, as an elected representative, the most engaged because Philadelphia and the United States has many peoples. We have people who don't speak English, they speak Spanish or they speak Chinese, and they may come from Haiti or Jamaica or Nigeria. And I usually go to their events. They invite all the politicians, but usually I am the one who goes. So over the many years, I connect with the people from different countries. And as a council member, I organized a round table of people who speak Russian because they all pretty much live in the same part of Philadelphia in the northeast section. They have the same values. They want a safe society, a clean community, good schools. They have very similar values, but when they are separated, their voice is weaker. When they are united, their voice is stronger. So I find that people from the Ukraine and people who immigrate from other countries to the United States, they very much have same expectations. They want to be treated fairly. They want to be respected. They don't want to be ridiculed or mistreated because of their accent or because they don't speak English. And so I'm a lawyer by trade before I was elected. And so I believe the law should apply fairly to everyone. And that means the government itself must obey the law.
You was the initiator, if I'm not mistaken, to honor President Zelensky from Philadelphia with the Liberty Medal, right?
Well, it's a little bit of an exaggeration. What happened is I did a resolution to request that the National Constitution Center consider President Zelensky for the medal, the Liberty Medal. But at any rate, I did a resolution, and then later, as it turned out, the people at the National Constitution Center did award the medal to President Zelensky.
When we talk about a lot of influential groups that can affect to stop the war as soon as it's possible, we're talking about politicians, we're talking about ordinary people, we're talking diaspora, we're talking about experts, and now we talk about our president. And let's not forget about Ukrainian people and Ukrainian armed forces. We understand that only together we can achieve the victory of civilized and democratic world. But as soon as I understand that you must be, as a politician, ambitious man, and surely you sometime will have a chance to be not only the politic who presents the local interests, but you will speak for the government of the United States sometime. I hope so, because you have your point of view. So let's see and say from the perspective of the near future, if you really have such ambitions, will it be possible for you? And the second one, when you are there as a politician that rule the country, what the future of Ukraine you see on the geopolitical grounds or the geopolitical field after the victory?
So thank you for that great compliment. I'm actually not ambitious. What I am is someone who does not want to sit around and do nothing. So I have been a council person here in Philadelphia for 11 years. I'm exploring to run for mayor. I'm not looking to go to Washington. I want to serve my city. We have many problems here. And I feel that politics and the nature of politics has prevented intelligent people and reasonable people from making very deep-rooted changes to improve the services here. But as the mayor of this city, the mayor does exert significant influence, even in Washington. Well, I'll say the mayor can, not that the mayor does. But if I were mayor, I would be engaged quite a bit with the global economy for the good of my city and empowering all the people from different parts of the world, including our Ukrainian diaspora, to have greater engagement overseas and providing them with more economic opportunities and more opportunities to benefit the country and the people that they came from. I think the way to look at this is not to take advantage of other people, but to mutually benefit. And I think that is possible. If I have 2 spoons and you have 2 forks, I give you a spoon for a fork. We have mutually benefited. There is no reason, in my opinion, that one party should harm the other party. I could buy a fork, I could trade for a fork, but I should not take the fork. And that leads to many problems. That's why I completely disagree with Mr. Putin going into the Ukraine. But as a mayor, I would like to empower the people of this city. That opens up many new ways that people can contribute to our society, but also benefit themselves and their future generations. The people who vote for me also vote for president. So we have a way to be influential, and I think my city, if I were mayor, would be engaged in the rebuilding of the Ukraine, in contributing to answering the problems, to delivering solutions. That is a way for Philadelphians to not only contribute to good things in the world, but to also have jobs and to gather investment. I am sure people in the Ukraine would like to contribute to a place like Philadelphia to see that we solve our problems and that they can bring their culture, their food, their perspectives. We can have cultural exchanges. We can work on many things together, such as in the creative arts economy. We can have sports engagements, but the more we travel back and forth, the more our dollars end up in the Ukraine, the more your dollars end up in Philadelphia. So I think there's a lot of ways to grow together.
Thank you for this optimistic perspective. And I think it's not accidentally that we have the same flag's color. I mean, the yellow and blue.
Yeah.
I visited Philadelphia. That's why I know about this, because
Yes.
when I saw it, I thought for the first sight that it was Ukrainian flags. And then my people explained me, no, that's a flag of Philadelphia. So this is not accidentally. So let's
Yes.
keep in touch and let's do our job as more effective as we can together. Thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you very much. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава, героям слава. David O was the guest of our show today. Stay with us.